Okay. Well, we're about at 12:03, so why don't we get started? Um, my name is Peyton Williams, and I am so excited to be here today with Teddi Bair, my new friend and counselor extraordinaire. Teddy, I'm going to have you introduce yourself in just a second. But today we are just going to jump into this topic that is pretty much on the minds of every parent, I would say, right now, which is dealing with anxiety in our children. And Teddy, you're going to help us a lot today. So why don't you give us a little introduction? Who are you? How have you gotten into this business of dealing with anxiety or helping parents and children deal with anxiety?
Oh, Peyton, thank you for that. I would have to say that preparing for this time together helps me so much because I'm in it with you and likely the other folks on this call. I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son, and they learning how to counsel parents through parenting a child with anxiety has been so helpful for me as a parent of kids who get anxious. So thanks. I am a counselor. I have a master's in clinical mental health counseling and work in private practice at the Cathedral Counseling Center in Buckhead. And this is my second career. Actually, for my first career, I have a master's in teaching neurodiverse learners. And I spent over 12 years working in education as a classroom teacher, as a learning specialist who worked with children who have diagnoses like anxiety and dyslexia and ADHD and other language processing disorders. And then I also worked as a coach for faculty and staff in a K-12 setting. So I got to sit one-on-one with the people who are in the classrooms with our children every day, like Peyton, like you used to do. And that's where I fell in love with sitting one-on-one or across from two people, talking about their beliefs around themselves, their beliefs around the world. When I was coaching in a school, we talked a lot about their beliefs around teaching and learning. And I loved that and I wanted more of it. So that's why I'm a counselor now. And I see adults in my practice. I don't see children right now. I see people 17, 18, all the way through 87, couples and individuals. But I specialize in treating the anxiety or OCD of children and teens by seeing their parents. So I see their parents with the goal of alleviating some of the symptoms of anxiety and OCD.
Awesome. Because that just makes me remember as a parent, even no matter what our kids are going through, we have influence and sometimes we don't know what to do with that influence. And so you are such a good resource for us. We're so thankful you're here.
Oh, thanks,
Um,
Peyton.
well, let's dive in. So when I think about my kids, I'm like, okay, I know there's right now all this talk right now, Teddy, about anxiety and mental health, and kids are more anxious today, and all this stuff. And honestly, that sometimes makes me anxious. All the talk about anxiety. So, can you help me sort through all the stuff that's going on right now with anxiety? And is this something I need to be worried about, or you know, give me a little perspective here.
Peyton, I'm so glad you started with that because one thing that I have learned about anxiety, and one thing that we, scientists, psychologists know about anxiety is that it is an interpersonal emotion. So what you're experiencing is really normal. So I think about when I fly on a plane and I'm experiencing turbulence. My first instinct, after I notice that my palms are sweaty or my stomach has butterflies, my first instinct is to look at the flight attendant's face and assess, do they have stress face or do they have calm face? Because I am looking to them to find out if I am okay.
Mm.
And that's what our children do too. Our children, because it's part of our mammalian instinct. is to attach to a primary caregiver. So that's what our children do. And when something triggers their anxiety or fear, they look directly to their most secure attachment base, which is usually a parent or caregiver, to know, am I okay?
Mm. So you're telling me I need to stop making stress face.
Sometimes we are in a situation where we need to protect ourselves. So, I think that's a great question, because one thing too we know about anxiety is that it is a protective emotion. So we need a certain level of anxiety in our lives in order to survive. That's why our species has survived as long as it has, because we can feel anxious and we can feel fear, and we can have a red flag saying, "Look, oh, I'm not okay. I need to find a way to get to be okay."
Mm,
Um, yeah. So sometimes it's good, and actually, I call that little a anxiety.
okay.
Anxiety that helps us, helps our kids or our teens study for a test is healthy. Or what's another really normal example of anxiety is in really young children, a fear of the dark.
Mm,
It's a natural tendency to be afraid of the dark when we're really young. Um, and just another a little bit more color to anxiety is that it usually shows up in three modalities.
okay.
It shows up in a physiological way. So, like I mentioned in the airplane example, like we might feel our heart rate rise, we might start to sweat, might get a stomach ache or feel kind of tingly in our hands and wrists. But it also can show up cognitively. We can start to think certain patterns or certain thoughts. We can kind of try and predict the future. When we try and predict the future, sometimes that's a trigger for anxiety.
Mm,
And then after it's showed up in those ways, that emotion motivates our behavior. It influences our behavior. So, anxiety driven behavior can show up in all kinds of ways, but a lot of times it can be avoidance.
mm.
Um, it can be hiding. I think about a child who's afraid to talk to an adult. They kind of hide behind their caregiver or their parent. It can also show up as aggression.
Mm.
Um, so more of an anxious pursuing type of style. Um,
Is that sort of like the fight or flight or freeze that's kicking in? Those different manifestations. I think of anxiety as a type of fear almost, right? It's like a fear of something you're not quite sure whether you need to be afraid of or not, and then is that what's happening in my brain? Like, is my amygdala all activated right now? Or, whenever I'm feeling anxious about an upcoming presentation or a pitch or something like that?
yes, I mean, yay brain language, amygdala, as Peyton mentioned. If you're not as familiar with the makeup of your brain, the amygdala is like this little like almond size part of our brain that's kind of in the center, like the back center, and it really is the center for emotion. Um, And so, yes, so when the amygdala is activated, when we are like when we're triggered by emotion, sometimes I like to say the amygdala hijacks our frontal cortex, our frontal lobe, which is like the center where we make decisions about what we're going to do.
Mm.
Um, and when it does that, we freeze, sometimes we want to fight, sometimes we want to go away. Yeah, yeah. Does that answer your question, Peyton?
Absolutely. So I'm hearing that anxiety is pretty normal. It feels like, hey, you kind of need anxiety in your life if you want to, get motivated. It's sort of built in that this is a normal thing. So I like this question you've got on your slide. When, as a parent, okay, my kid's just shy, or my kid's having anxiety problems. My kid is worried about their test, or my kid needs help with anxiety. My kid is stressed out about college versus my kid really needs some help. How do I know, like, as a parent, how would I be able to tell?
That is such a good question. I get this question all the time, and I define it this way. Anxiety becomes a problem, or what I call capital A or big A anxiety, when it interferes with your child or your teen's sleep, when it interferes with their weight or with their relationships or their academics for
Mm.
more than a month or two.
Okay.
So, for example, when a child experiences anxiety that is really exaggerated relating to things or situations that don't actually pose danger for an extended period of time, more than a month or two, that's a problem. And for some children and teens, and for adults too, this is the same for adults, the anxiety system can be triggered internally
Mm.
by worry or obsessive thoughts or panic attacks, even when there's no external trigger for it. I mean, I know I've felt it before. I'll say, I feel anxious and I can't even put a finger on why.
Mm. And Teddy, on those, I mean, obviously I laugh because, anybody with teens is going like, okay, well, are they even going to tell me about this? How do I know? Yes, I heard you say wait. So I'm watching for kind of fluctuations over, outside of the normal range over months, a couple months. I'm looking out for, is my child not getting able to sleep? I mean, that's something I can pay attention to.
Mhm.
Are there any questions, like, especially with, as our kids get older, are there any questions we can ask our kids to help us sort of tease out if this is really happening for them?
Yeah, sometimes anxiety can show up in surprising ways. So, a parent who's noticing that their child is withdrawing from their friend circles, or becoming kind of aggressive in with friends, that could be anxiety. And
Mm.
the thing too, like I wish there was a magic question that I could ask my 9-year-old to figure out what she's feeling, and that she would respond and say, "Well, actually, I think it's a little bit of anxiety, but maybe." It's also a little bit of anger or sadness, but that language of feelings is not innate. It is taught, and it can be modeled by us. So, as a parent, what I highly encourage all my clients, and what I'm really working on personally for myself is modeling how to get granular about how I'm feeling. And I
Mm.
don't unload on my kids, but like when I can name what I'm feeling, I can tame it.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, just I mean, looking at sleep, if they, we kind of generally know how many hours our kids like to get a night. And we want to monitor whether they're getting that. And, if we know that they're in a setting where they're not using blue light, about an hour, 30 minutes before they go to bed, where they have a nice dark room that has comfortable bedding, where they have enough time to get as much sleep as if the conditions are right and they're still not sleeping,
Mm.
that's a time to kind of dig in, and you might need to name it for them. It just seems like because you're getting up a few times a night, you're not falling asleep, or you're waking up and you're not able to go back to sleep. Seems like maybe something's got you feeling anxious.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if you know what it is, or if you could think for a minute about something that's coming up or something that's happened that's got you feeling it.
Awesome.
Um,
Super
yeah.
helpful. I'm curious too, and tell me if we need to go on to the next slide because I know you've got some great stuff. But, as a parent, I feel in our culture like kids are getting much more well versed in their emotions. And, kids before who never heard of depression now can, name, oh, I've got depression or I've got anxiety, and they are feeling all this. Um, do you There's a sense in me that sometimes our kids who are not, again, their brains are still developing, they're developing this language, they're developing their own self-awareness around their emotions, that they sort of look and go, oh, well, Teddy's got anxiety and she's therefore special. I have anxiety. What do you do if you're a parent and your kid comes to you and they're like, I'm anxious? And you're like, this feels like little a anxious, not big A anxious. But, how do I not minimize that feeling, but also not give in to the like, I'm not actually sure that you have anxiety. I'm not a
That's
doctor, but
right. Yeah. And I think key in what you said is how do I not minimize it?
Mm,
Because we want to set the tone that like we're open to hearing whatever our kids, especially our teenagers, want to share with us. And part of that period of time between, the start of adolescence to adulthood is trying things on. Like it's their job. They're doing their job if they are kind of trying on different ways of being. And the other thing that comes up for me when I think about hearing about this, because I've heard this, Peyton, about kids, teenagers who come and say, I think I have OCD, or I think so and so is a narcissist. And they're using all of this like really clinical language. Um, and it's like, do you really think that is that really happening for you? Um, uh, the job of a teenager is to seek autonomy and to join with a pack.
mm,
I think I'm quoting Lisa Damore here, who wrote The Emotional Lives of Teenagers. And if you don't know that book and you have teenagers, or if you have kids who will one day become teenagers, I cannot recommend it enough. Um, and she talks about how important the job of a teenager is in separating their identity from their family and joining with a friend group. And she likens it to like a wolf pack and the
mm,
importance of survival for wolves to join a pack. And so it's totally normal for a teenager to look at what somebody else in their friend group is doing and to kind of try and emulate it.
mm,
Um, so tuck that away when you hear that, and it may be like the content of what they're emulating may be alarming. Like you think you have an eating disorder, or you are grappling with your gender identity, and you're seeing somebody else doing that in your friend group. Um, just know like they are doing their job of becoming autonomous from their family.
mm,
Um, and yes, I don't minimize it, accept it, and also pay attention. Pay attention to what comes up for you, your feelings when they say what they say, and then pay attention to their habits and their behaviors. Um, and also, if you're feeling like really big emotions, like I am really worried that my child has an anxiety problem, or that my child has an eating disorder, or that my child has OCD. They're saying they do. I don't know. I can't tell. Seek help. There are so many resources out there for you to process your own feelings around that, to learn a little bit more about what it actually looks like and start to discern. So a therapist like me, teachers, counselors at the school, um, all can be supports and all want to be supports.
it's super helpful. I'm gonna need to call you when that happens, Teddy, because I always laugh. There's a couple different, ways that parents parent, and I tend to be a minimizer and like, hey, tough it out. You got this. And I know we're gonna talk about that later, but I do, with what we know about anxiety being on the rise in teenagers, particularly, I want to be mindful of it. And yeah, this slide that you've got here, it's like, okay, whew, it's treatable if my kid does come down with this, right? So tell us a little bit about this. What do
So
I do?
So in my practice, I have specialized training in treating anxiety. And the training that I have is out of Yale's Child Studies Center, and it's called Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions,
Mm,
or SPACE is the acronym. But there's lots of modes of treatment for anxiety. Um, and I've listed them on this slide here. But one of the things that I really want to reassure parents is that anxiety is treatable. We're seeing a lot more of it post pandemic, um, and um, and and in my practice, since I see the parents with the goal of resolving the child or teen's anxiety, one thing I want to say is you did not cause your child's anxiety, and you cannot control it. Period. Hard stop. And one way I know this is that there are families with multiples, um, and only one of their children will have a diagnosable anxiety problem.
mm,
So we know that family systems don't cause it. You can, like you mentioned earlier, Peyton, you can influence it. Um, and so in my practice, the number one thing that I teach parents in space treatment is how to respond to your child supportively.
Mm,
Um, because our response to our child's anxiety-driven behavior can set the table for our child to learn that they can manage their anxiety themselves.
mm,
Um, yeah. And so there's actually two parenting pitfalls that I want to tell you about um, in responding to a child or a teen's anxiety. And one is the protective parent. And y'all, I'm giving examples from my own parenting. So a protective parent might respond to a child who's anxious by saying, she can't handle this. I've got to do it for her. So, for example, every time we have a thunderstorm, my 5-year-old, now 6, comes into my bedroom at night, and what I do typically is I say, "Oh, come here, get in bed, climb in with me. You're safe, I've got you." And immediately his anxiety goes away. So it's working, right? But it's not supportive.
mm,
Um, his fears are eased for the moment, but it's not supportive of him knowing that he can handle the fear or the anxiety that comes with thunderstorms. I'm not communicating that to him. It's not supportive of me because he kicks and I'm awake. So I'm not getting the sleep that I need. And then the second pitfall is demanding parenting. And this is where I go when I'm stressed, because this is kind of the way that this was my parents' parenting style. Buck up, you've got it. Just, you're fine. Keep moving. Yeah.
that's
Yes.
me.
And so an example here might be I take my daughter to Jalisco's for dinner. Take my kids because it's an easy, quick dinner. And she went through a phase where she got really nervous ordering her food. And I was so frustrated. I mean, I was just like, I'd had it because her younger brother could order his food. But when it came time for her to do it, she just wouldn't. She'd refuse. She'd kind of hide behind me. And I remember saying to her, your brother, who is 3 years younger than you, can order his own food. Why can't you? That was not supportive. It was not supportive of her because I did not communicate that I thought she was really capable. In fact, I kind of embarrassed her in front of her brother and anyone else that could hear, possibly even shamed her. And that was not supportive of me either, because I have this long-term goal with my kids that when they are old enough to live on their own, and I hope they do, that is one goal. I hope that they want to come back and see me and have a relationship with me in their adulthood. And so when I am like cutting off connection with her, like I did in that moment, I am lessening the chance that she will someday want to come back and have a relationship with me as an adult. So, anyway, if you are seeing yourself in either of these examples of protective or demanding parenting, know that you are not alone. And there is another way, there is a supportive way to respond to your child. And I call this macaroni and cheese because I need a quick, easy way to remember it, or I will forget in the heat of the moment. But a supportive statement in response to a child's anxiety-driven behavior includes both empathy and efficacy. So empathy is naming the feeling you see or you think they are feeling, right? So like you're feeling scared. And efficacy is then naming your confidence in their ability to handle that feeling. So you're feeling scared, and I know you can handle this. That's a supportive statement. You cannot make macaroni and cheese without the noodles and the cheese. And I work with parents, and I also do this myself, where I'll say, but I did give a supportive statement. I was like, you've got this. You can do it. Get out and do it. that statement was missing the empathy. It was missing the validation of, "Ooh, you're feeling a big feeling right now, and I see you."
Mm,
Or I'll say, "Oh, it is so hard. You are scared. It's okay. Just stay home from the party. Don't go." And I'll think that's a supportive statement, right? Because I saw what my kid was feeling. I acknowledged, I validated, but I, I missed out on the efficacy, right? Like, and you can handle it.
yeah. So it sounds like this is a strategy that we can use for kids, both who have big A anxiety, although that also is then coupled with some extra help from people like you. But this is also a strategy that we use with little a anxiety that our kids might be exhibiting. Like, I'm probably not going to seek you out, Teddy, if my kid continues, for the next month to not want to order at the restaurant. But if, a couple months from now and they're losing sleep over, oh my gosh, I had a horrible dream about not being able to order, that's when I'm going to mac and cheese it. And I'm going to be like, Teddy, help me out here.
Yeah, great, Peyton. I'm glad you pointed. It's kind of like, when do you seek help? What I do with parents in space treatment is it's when you start to feel like life is becoming unmanageable and my child's anxiety driven behavior is getting in the way of my health. It's
Mm.
getting in the way of my sleep. It's getting in the way of my relationship with my partner or with my friends. It's getting in the way of my social or my weight, like I have to eat certain things at home because my child is so anxious about what we serve.
Mm.
Um, when you start to notice that your life and your well-being is affected by your child's anxiety or OCD, please, please reach out for help from a professional.
Well, and Teddy, this has been so helpful because I think for me, it's really put into perspective that like kids are going to have some anxiety. Like I think I've been so worried. Oh my gosh, if they show any sign of anxiety, I need to be worried. But it really is, it's normal. It's good for them, as you said. And then there's also great resources when it gets to kind of that tipping point of, oh, this is not normal anymore.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for giving us kind of the normal, for giving us the mac and cheese strategy to really help us speak with empathy and efficacy. I love those two smashed together. I mean, it really is the ultimate way to talk to our kids. And I can see how it works. So, is there any final thing you want to say before we sign off here at 12:30?
Oh, thank you for having me here, and thanks to the folks who joined us today. And I'm just so grateful to have been here and to be with you.
Awesome, y'all. Well, I'll send out a recording of this event, and then I'll also share. You've got Teddy's email address. Hopefully, I'll make sure that y'all get it at the end. So she'll be a great resource for y'all moving forward. And Teddy, we're so thankful you were here, and everybody, thank you so much for joining Bowbend Consulting with Counseling Corner with Teddi Bair. Awesome, y'all have a great day.
Thanks.